Your person have been crying over you. They have become fixated on you since you. Wait, pause for a second. Something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted. And if you've been feeling a strange heaviness in the air around you lately, a sense that something on their end has been unraveling without explanation, you're not imagining it. Because while you've been carrying on with your days, doing your best to stay grounded, doing your best to not check, not wonder, not hope, they've been quietly falling apart in ways they would never let anyone see. And it started after you, not because of something dramatic, not because of one big moment, but because something inside them finally caught up to what they'd been running from. There's a kind of crying that doesn't look like crying. It looks like staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. It looks like sitting in the car after parking, not getting out, not knowing why. It looks like that long pause in the middle of an ordinary task, when their hand stops moving and their eyes lose focus, and they don't even realize they've been somewhere else in their head for the last 5 minutes. That's where they've been living lately. In those quiet collapses no one is witnessing. And you've been at the center of every one of them. If this message speaks to your heart, comment, "I receive this love," like the video, and subscribe for more. Let me walk you into what's actually been happening, because I think you deserve to understand the weight of it. Not the dramatized version, not the over-the-top version that some part of you might be tempted to either dismiss or cling to. The real version, the one that's grounded, human, and honestly, much heavier than they would ever admit out loud. It didn't start all at once. That's the thing about fixation. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive in a single dramatic moment. It builds, quietly, in the small spaces between everything else they're trying to do. They thought they were handling it. They thought distance would do the work. They thought the absence of you in their daily life would slowly fade into something manageable, something they could fold into the rest of their experiences and move past. That's what they told themselves. That's what they expected. But something didn't go according to plan. Something kept pulling them back. Stay with this, because there's a deeper emotional layer here that you need to feel, not just hear. It started with small things. A reflex they didn't know they still had. Reaching for their phone to tell you something before remembering they couldn't. Hearing a phrase you used to say, and physically flinching for a second before composing themselves. Walking past a place that meant nothing to anyone else but everything to the two of you, and feeling their chest tighten in a way they couldn't explain to anyone, if they tried. They started noticing how often they were thinking about you, and once they noticed, they couldn't unnotice it. That's when the crying started. Not the obvious kind, the private kind. The kind where they're alone, maybe driving home from somewhere, maybe sitting in the shower a little too long, maybe lying in bed at an hour when no one's awake to ask questions. And it would come from nowhere. A small wave, a tightness, a few tears they didn't plan for, and then it would pass, and they would wipe their face, and they would tell themselves it was just a moment, just tiredness, just one of those days. But it wasn't just a moment. It kept happening. It kept finding them. And each time, the feeling underneath it was the same. A quiet, growing awareness that they had lost something they didn't fully understand the weight of, until it was gone. This is where understanding slowly begins. Because what they've been crying about isn't just you. It's themselves. It's the version of themselves they were with you. It's the version of themselves they didn't know how to be without you. Fixation is a strange word. It sounds intense, and from the outside, intensity is hard to imagine on them, because they've always carried themselves like someone in control, someone composed, someone who handles things. But fixation, the real kind, doesn't look the way movies show it. It looks like a mind that won't stop returning to one place no matter how many distractions it's offered. It looks like opening their phone to do one thing and ending up on your name. It looks like rehearsing imaginary conversations with you in their head while they're trying to fall asleep. It looks like scrolling and stopping and going back and not even knowing why they're doing it. They've been doing all of that, more than they would ever say, more than they would ever even acknowledge to themselves on the surface. What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything. Because at some point, they crossed a line inside themselves where they could no longer pretend this was just lingering attachment. This wasn't residue. This wasn't habit. This was something deeper. Something that had its hooks in a part of them they didn't know they had given to you. You have to understand, they thought they knew themselves. They thought they had a sense of their own emotional capacity. They thought they could measure how much someone mattered by how easily they could move on. And by that measure, you weren't supposed to be this. You weren't supposed to take up this much space after the fact. You weren't supposed to keep arriving in their mind unannounced, day after day, week after week, in moments that had nothing to do with you on the surface. But there you are, in the song that comes on without warning, in the corner of a room they walk into, in the smell of something familiar, in the way someone else laughs and reminds them, just for a second, of you. In dreams they don't remember clearly, but wake up from with a heaviness they can't shake. Maybe I let go of something I didn't know how to hold. That's the thought they keep circling back to. Not in those exact words, maybe, but in that exact shape. There's a recognition settling into them that what they had with you wasn't ordinary, that they treated something rare like something replaceable, that they assumed there would be more of it elsewhere, or later, or with someone else, and now they're realizing, slowly, painfully, that there isn't. Not really. Not in the way they thought. This is where things quietly began to shift, because the moment a person admits to themselves that what they lost was singular, not interchangeable, everything changes. The grief becomes different. The longing becomes different. The shape of their days starts to bend around an absence they can't fill with anyone else. They've tried, or maybe they haven't even tried, because some part of them already knew it wouldn't work. Either way, the result is the same. They've ended up here, crying privately, thinking about you constantly, fixated in a way they're embarrassed by, in a way they would never admit even to their closest friend. There's a specific image I want you to hold. Picture them sitting somewhere quiet. Maybe their car, maybe the edge of their bed, maybe a chair in a room with the lights off, holding their phone. Your name pulled up, or close to being pulled up. Their thumb hovering over a message they haven't sent. They've written it and deleted it more times than they would tell anyone. Sometimes it's long. Sometimes it's just 3 words. Sometimes it's just hi. And every time they stop themselves, they lock the phone, they put it face down, they breathe in, they breathe out, and they tell themselves not tonight. But the next night comes, and the next. And the urge doesn't go away, it grows. That's the part they didn't anticipate. They thought time would weaken it, they thought distance would dilute it. Instead, time has clarified it, distance has sharpened it. They see you more clearly now than they did when you were close. And that clarity is its own kind of unbearable. If this resonates, let it settle in you. Don't rush past it. Don't try to package it neatly. Just let it sit. Here's something I want you to hear, because I think it matters. The reason they've been crying isn't just about losing you. It's about realizing what they did to themselves by losing you. Because somewhere in there, they understood, really understood, that you were one of the few people who saw them without expectation, who let them be the messy, complicated, imperfect version of themselves and didn't flinch, who didn't need them to perform, who didn't need them to keep up an image. And when you're someone who spent most of your life performing for everyone else, having one person you didn't have to perform for is rare. So rare that when it's gone, you don't just miss the person. You miss the version of yourself you got to be with them. That's what's haunting them. The version of themselves they were when they were with you. They can't get back to that version through anyone else. They've tried in subtle ways. They've tried to be that version in other rooms, with other people in other contexts. And it doesn't work. It feels forced. It feels staged. It feels like wearing a coat that belongs to someone else. And this is the part they're still trying to understand. Why a person can change the shape of who you're able to be. Why one connection can unlock a version of yourself you didn't know existed. Why losing that person feels like losing access to a part of your own interior life. They didn't expect this, none of it. They expected to miss you, sure, a normal amount, the kind of missing that's manageable and fades. They didn't expect to find themselves crying in their kitchen at midnight over something so small it barely qualifies as a memory. They didn't expect to lose their appetite for a few days after seeing something that reminded them of you. They didn't expect to feel this quiet, persistent ache that doesn't have a clean name. There's something I want you to know about fixation in this context, because I think it's being misunderstood by a lot of people who go through what you're going through. Fixation isn't obsession. It's not unhealthy. It's not a sign of imbalance necessarily. Sometimes fixation is just what happens when someone hasn't finished processing what they had. When the meaning of a connection becomes clear only after it's been removed from their immediate environment. When their mind insists on staying with something until it's been understood, even if the understanding is painful. That's where they are right now. Their mind is refusing to let this go because some part of them knows it isn't finished, and the body knows things the conscious mind hasn't caught up to yet. The body cries before the mind admits why. The body aches before the mind names the source. The body returns to a person in dreams before the mind is brave enough to think about them while awake. You don't need to force this, just feel it. Because you've probably been carrying your own version of this too, and there's something important about knowing you haven't been alone in it. There was a specific moment recently. I won't pretend to know the exact day, but I'll tell you what I sense, where it broke through more sharply than usual. Maybe they were doing something completely unrelated. Driving somewhere, cooking, sitting in a public place, and it came over them out of nowhere, a wave they couldn't brace for. A surge of feeling that made them step away from whatever they were doing because they didn't want anyone to see. They went somewhere private, a bathroom, a car, a back room, and they let it happen for a few minutes. Real tears, the kind that come from somewhere deep, the kind that surprise you with their force. And after, they sat there feeling embarrassed by themselves, almost angry at themselves, asking quietly, why is this still happening? Why now? Why over this? Why so long after? But the question they should have been asking, and that part of them already knew, was simpler. Why have I been pretending this didn't matter as much as it did? That's the question that's been forming slowly inside them. Not in those words exactly, but in that shape. In that direction. They're starting to confront something they've been hiding from for a while now, that they minimized you, that they convinced themselves you weren't as significant as you actually were, that they let pride or fear or timing or whatever excuse they were using lead them away from something that, in their honest moments, they know they would do anything to have back. This part, they didn't see coming. They didn't see how the weight of what they lost would land on them in waves, in small private moments, in the gap between their public composure and their private collapse. Why does this still feel unfinished? That question has become a kind of background hum in their mind. They don't sit with it directly. They don't write about it in a journal. They don't talk to a friend about it in plain terms. But it lives in them now. It shows up in the way they look at their phone, in the way they pause when someone mentions a place that means something to both of you, in the way they linger on certain photos, certain memories, certain dates on the calendar. Be still and know. That line keeps surfacing in moments like these, not because anyone is forcing a spiritual frame on this, but because there's something quiet and real about the idea that you don't have to do anything for what's true to keep being true. You don't have to chase. You don't have to fix. You don't have to remind them. The work is already happening inside them, in the parts of themselves they thought were sealed off. If you've felt this shift too, you already understand. There's a difference between hoping someone is thinking of you and sensing that they are. And what you've been sensing isn't your imagination. It's the residue of a real emotional process happening on their end. You've been picking up on it the way people pick up on weather changes before the storm. The pressure shift, the quiet tension in the air, the instinct that something is about to break. Something is breaking, not in a damaging way, in a clearing way, in a way that has to happen before anything new can begin. They're not the same person they were when this distance started. They've been changed by this, by the loss of you, by the silence, by the realization, by the crying they didn't expect, by the fixation they don't fully understand. They are softer in places they used to be hard. They are humbler in places they used to be certain. They are more honest with themselves in places they used to perform. And that's the work that had to happen. That's the work that couldn't have happened if you were still close. Sometimes the only way someone can fully understand what you mean to them is to be removed from your presence long enough to feel your absence. It's a brutal kind of teacher, but it's the most effective one. And it's been teaching them for a while now. Something about them still stays with me. That's the line that's been running through their mind. Not exact, but close. The shape of you in their memory has refused to fade. The sound of your voice in old conversations they can't quite remember word for word, but can remember the feeling of. The way you used to look at them. The small specific ways you cared about them that they took for granted then, and would give anything to feel again now. So when I say they've been crying over you, I want you to hear it the right way. Not as a victory. Not as something to gloat over. Not as ammunition for a story you tell yourself. But as a quiet reality that's been unfolding without your involvement. As something that has its own integrity. As a process that is, in its own way, sacred. Because regret transformed into clarity is one of the most honest emotional movements a person can go through. They're not done yet. The processing is still happening. The fixation hasn't released them. The tears haven't fully passed. But something is shifting. Something is moving from the inside out. And the version of them that emerges from this isn't going to be able to keep pretending the way they have been. You don't need to do anything with this information. You don't need to message them. You don't need to make a move. You don't need to wait by your phone. You don't need to adjust your life around this knowing. The only thing you need to do is let it inform you. Let it confirm what you've been sensing. Let it bring you peace where there's been doubt. Because here's the thing about being on the receiving end of someone's quiet undoing. It asks nothing of you except presence. Stay present. Stay rooted. Stay in your own life. Keep tending to your own becoming. The most attractive thing you can be right now, both to them and to yourself, is unbothered, intact, and quietly thriving in your own existence. That's not coldness. That's not strategy. That's just truth. The person who keeps their center while someone else is finding their way back to it is the person who shapes the eventual reunion, if one comes, on healthier terms. So if you've been wondering whether you've been on their mind, you have. If you've been wondering whether they've felt the absence, they have, more deeply than they would ever admit. If you've been wondering whether your worth has finally registered for them, it has, and it's been arriving in slow, painful waves that they're still in the middle of. Let yourself receive that. Not as proof, not as a guarantee, just as a quiet confirmation of something real. And what they're beginning to realize now is something they can't walk away from anymore. Not this time.